Okay, we'll go ahead and get started now. Hello, members and friends. I'm Cynthia Hirsch, International President of the Retail Design Institute. Welcome to the third part of our career building series, Can We Talk? With so many applying for the same positions and having been out of the job search for a while, we developed our series aimed at helping our members to brush up on their skills and help them land their next big thing. Once again, we're pleased to have Winston Wright of Whispering Loudly here to help dive into interview do's and don'ts, along with Genevieve Davis, Senior Director of Existing Store Construction at 7-Eleven, Barb Beagley of Restark Design Studio, Julia Scrivens of 7-Eleven, and Bob Ustanik, recent graduate from Bellevue College in Seattle. We'll start with Winston and then switch over to a panel discussion and questions. Bob will be leading tonight's Q&A. You will be able to ask questions to all of our panelists throughout by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. A quick reminder before we begin that the deadline for the 50th design competition has been extended to April 12th. This Friday, please join us as we present our next CEU course at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Details are available on our website, retaildesigninstitute.org/events. And a big special thank you to our international sponsor, Planet Construction. Without Planet Construction support, none of this would be possible, so thank you. And without further ado, let me turn it over to the one and only Winston Wright.
Thanks, Cynthia. Can everybody see my screen? Yeah? Okay. Greetings from New York. It was another absolutely beautiful day here. As I was saying to the panelists earlier, turtleneck season is just about over, and that disappoints me. My name is Winston Wright, and here's the self-gratuitous plug. The name of my consultancy is Whispering Loudly. We're in the business of brand, and our clients include Time, Clorox, ADMI, and Lee Hecht Harrison, which is the largest outplacement firm in the world, and that's where I do my career transition coaching. I was thinking about how much territory we've got to cover tonight, and I was thinking about job search, and it's a matrix, and we've got a lot of territory to cover tonight, but I just wanted to throw in, we've done resume, we've done portfolio, we're going to do interviewing. We're circling around this whole notion of messaging. A messaging campaign is what a job search is. And I just wanted to remind us that all of this is mutually exclusive, but it has to be looked at piece by piece, collectively, holistically, and synergistically. So can we talk? It reminds me of that Saturday Night Live sketch. As before, there's no dictates here. There's only direction, no silver bullet. These are just subjective best practices and substantive suggestions to help you in your job search. So I'm going to show this slide every time I do a presentation for you guys, because you have to be thinking in these terms. Content is king. And we've talked about resume, which is a CV, curriculum vitae, portfolio, CO, and I've decided that this is a new Latin term, personal conference. An interview is a personal conference. So we're going to call this a CP. So we're going to try to keep that theme going. I don't know how we're going to do next month, but we'll see what happens. You guys know how I love my word origin, and you can see where this came from. To see or visit each other briefly is what the root of the word, the invention, the use of the word comes from. It's a noun and a verb, and you just might want to quickly look at these. As a noun, it's a meeting. As a verb, it's to interview. So I like to keep this in context, because most of the words we use today, well, 80%, 85% of the words we use today that aren't colloquial in nature have a beginning in one of the ancient tongues. And it when they didn't communicate a lot, it was easier. Webster calls it a formal consultation, student or employer, a meeting in which information is obtained. Wikipedia calls a job interview a conversation between an applicant and an employer conducted to assess whether the applicant should work for the company. And I was very, sorry guys, can I go back? Guys, give me 1 second. I apologize for this. You know, you can rehearse it a million times and it never happens the way you want it to. I was really interested in this Harvard definition, and three things I want to point out. Your fit with the employer organization, how well you've considered your reasons for applying, and how clearly you express your contribution to the organization. All three of these, particularly the last one and the last two, are this whole notion of messaging. So in our context, I've said this: personal communications between a job candidate, potential managers, coworkers, and influencers regarding the candidate's subject knowledge and personal compatibilities based on skills, proficiencies, personality perception, which the candidate offers to the company, based on critical thinking, past success, and behaviors in a clearly developed, clear, concise, I added amicable, muscular communication. I will continue to drive home creatively developed, clear, concise, muscular communication, because that's what it is. I added amicable to this because so much of interviewing is about fit. So before you interview, you have to apply for the job. Do not be seduced or discouraged by titles. One man's manager is another man's senior director. But before you apply, you have to be aware. And before you even think of applying, you need to read every single word of a job description. This comes back to interviewing people. Just hear me out. Most people read the job title and the descriptive paragraph. Most people use that as the impetus for an application. That's what's on the left. The entire job description is what's on the right. But most people just react to the title and that opening paragraph. You have to read it word for word. And after you do that, copy and paste it into a new document, and then give yourself, and then answer every single one of the points on that job description. Give yourself a grade and average it. If you're at 68, and if you're honest with yourself, if you're at 68, 70, 75, 80, I wouldn't go there. There's an interesting statistic. This will be interesting for the audience. Men typically will apply at 80%. Women wait until 92. I think if you're in the 88 to 90 range, you can give it a shot. But if you, one of the other reasons to do this comparison is so that you can identify gaps in what the job is looking for and what you're able to bring to the table to do it. Now, what does that have to do with interviewing? It has to do with interviewing. If somebody asks you a question and it's in your gap range, you've got to be prepared to have an answer for that. So again, a job search is a marketing campaign. And we're going to go through this again. Deployment of information about a product or service, positioning, objective, with a series of messages targeted at general and specific audiences. So if job search is a marketing campaign And if a marketing campaign is the execution of developed messages at targeted audiences, then interviewing is a stress test against your messaging plan and an execution of your messaging strategy. And this whole notion of messaging strategy goes back to the Rubik's Cube, because that's what this is all about. Interviewing is crafted messages targeted to specific audiences who collectively make up a general audience. And hitting that target ain't that easy. It's a tiny target way up in the corner, and it's tough to do. The other thing that interviewing is that it's a dogfight disguised as a chess game. This is where the strategic piece comes in, disguised as a chess game with the attitudinal goal of avoiding an interrogation. You don't want to be the guy on the other side of the table in the police station, avoiding an interrogation and engaging in a conversation. This is what you want to do in an interview. And this is pretty high level, but let's just go there for a second. It's this whole notion of intimidation and I've got to say the right thing. Excuse me, you do have to say the right thing. But the more that you can do to co-pilot a conversation rather than be on the bad side of an interrogation, the better you're going to be. And this is regardless of level, whether you're interviewing to be an SVP or whether you're interviewing to be a junior assistant, deputy, associate, designer. My first job in visual was sweeping the shop floor. The interview needs to be conversational. It gives you the opportunity to show maturity and intelligence. So let's talk about getting ready for your interview. The best advice, the first big piece of advice I can give is be a good Boy Scout and be prepared. That's what you got to do. So let's talk about preparation. You've got to know your audience, have icebreakers for them. I'll give an example that I'll give a New York example. If you're interviewing, if you're an NYU graduate and you interviewed with someone who's interviewing with someone who's also an NYU graduate, you're going to wear a white shirt and a violet tie, or a white blouse and a violet scarf, because that's an NYU thing. Know your audience and have icebreakers going into the conversation to cut the tension. Have your stories ready. Have your exit statement ready, and have your situation, obstacle, action, result stories lined up. That goes back to that job description thing. How are you going to tell those stories? And have your questions for your interviewer, when you're given the chance to ask questions, have them ready and have them prioritized. So what happens the day of your interview? Wear whatever it is in your wardrobe that makes you feel the most comfortable and the most confident. The last thing you want to be doing is worrying about your for me, like did I spill coffee on my turtleneck? Do I, you want to feel great. The clothes that make you feel the most confident, those are the ones you want to wear. Make sure they're comfortable, but you're not going to show up in sweatpants. You guys get the idea. You bring your resume, your portfolio, digital or printed, a printed copy of the job description, and a writing implement, because you're going to take copious notes on the back of the printed copy of the job description. Get there, if this is a face-to-face, get there 20 minutes early. Acclimate to the climate. If it's cold outside, you don't want your nose to be running. If it's hot outside, you don't want to be dripping. Get there early to acclimate. Go to the bathroom, wash your hands, straighten your scarf, put on your lipstick, sit up straight when you're with them. Focus on the conversation. Look at them square in the eye. Do not look anywhere else. Take copious notes, use their names, and above all, be authentic. Possible formats for interviewing. Phone, here we go, phone, video, face-to-face, panel, social. It could be any or all of these, depending on how far you go through the interview process. It could be all of these, but these are the things you need to your environment and where you're going to be, your surroundings, the intimacy or lack of intimacy on your interview. You need to keep these things in mind and be ready for them. I've also put together some tips for e-interviewing or virtual interviewing. Check your gear and pretend that it's face-to-face. If this is on the phone, make sure your connection is good. If you're going to use headphones, make sure the sound quality is good. Get dressed. Stand in front of a mirror. No echoes in the room, no background noises, no dogs barking, nothing like that. And when you're looking in the mirror, have post-notes all over the mirror of notes to yourself so they're easy to access. Video, make sure your connection is working. Get dressed. Have a clean background with good lighting. No dogs, no kids, no kitchen noises, no music. And this is super important for video interviews. The camera, your camera from your device should be at eye level, and you should look into the camera when you're answering the question, because if you're looking down here at them, you're not looking at them. It's hard to do. You can glance down occasionally to get a reaction, and for God's sake, smile. Phone, person, face-to-face, whatever it is. We're going to go through what a possible interview cycle or an interview loop or line could be. And just for reference sake, I've contained this to everything being internal, no external recruiter, no agency involvement, nothing like that. Everything here is within the company. Round one is going to be a screen with a recruiter probably. And just like you made a checklist, just like you compared your answers to your job description, trust me, that's what this screener is doing. They've got a list of the job description, and they're based on your answers, they're giving you a score the same way you're going to give the score for yourself. Your second round is either going to be a step up with HR, maybe a senior recruiter, or maybe an HR director, or you're going to get handed off to the hiring manager. A hiring manager is the individual who's the decision maker who's going to hire you. Keep that in mind. We're also going to talk about the compensation question. Round three will probably be with in-team peers or cross-functional peers. You may, particularly since we're in design, get a test. We're going to talk about this. As you go up the ladder or as you go down the chain, if you're going to have people reporting to you, this is where it's going to happen, probably. After you've passed the test, then you're going to have the conversation to talk to the people who will be reporting to you, and you may have an opportunity to talk to senior leadership. So round one, the screener is probably by phone, maybe video. Excuse me. It is this checklist of your resume versus the qualifications and responsibilities of the job. And hopefully the compensation question is going to come up here. Let's talk about it for a second. The recruiter is going to ask, what are your compensation expectations? And I think the answer is, well, I know you've got something budgeted for the role. What is that range? 98 times out of 100, the response is going to be, what are your compensation expectations? So let's talk about what that might be, and let's talk about comp. Salary and bonus is total cash. Benefits are a separate ad, and the whole boatload is total comp. So what you're trying to do here, the range you want to give them is based around total cash. You need to know your minimums, your excavated minimum, your essential, your extra, and your extended. Let's talk about those for just a second. Your excavated minimum is your rock bottom. Your essential is what you need to like continue to go on. Your extra is living the lifestyle you've been living plus a little bit more, so it can be extra. And then even more than that, make yourself super, super happy because you're going to have another child. You're going to, have another 2 children. And then you could make yourself very happy and double your income. Know what your minimums are up and down the board. Your minimum in terms of this salary range should be somewhere between your rock bottom and a little above your essential. That's for you to decide. Take that number, give yourself a 5 to 7% raise. Then take the new number and add 12.5 to 17.5% to it. You could say between 15 and 20%. 10% on a $40,000 salary is $4,000. 10% on a $400,000 a year salary is $40,000. At the higher level, that's a smaller gap than it is at the lower level. The new number and the percentage number is your base salary range. How do you answer the compensation question? My annual base range is between X and Y, and I'm accustomed to a program, a bonus program that is generally whatever it is you're accustomed to. That's how you answer the compensation question. And it needs to be, if it's not answered by the end of round 2, you've got to insert into the conversation and ask what it is. Round 2 is going to be with that second level of HR and or your hiring manager. And this is going to be particular questions about how you match up to the job and behavioral questions to see how well you might fit with your boss, the team, and the organization. One of the most common questions in this round, and like maybe the next 2, is tell me about yourself. This is not a litany of your resume. It's about yourself. Tell me about yourself in context to the role and your proficiencies. I'm a son of the South. At 26, I decided to escape and fulfill my dream to live and work in New York City. I came here working for Saks Fifth Avenue, and then I went to work for Macy's where I was doing this, and then I start talking about my history. And somewhere along the way, pardon me, somewhere along the way, because the job description says organizational skills are really important in this role, I'm going to say, you know, the other thing, I love to cook, but my partner does not come in the kitchen because they're afraid to come in the kitchen, because I know where everything in my kitchen is. There's like little labels on the shelves. I know exactly where to reach to get the oregano. And the reason I do that is, number one, I'm just an organizational nut. Number two, I don't want to have to spend my time looking for the oregano. I want to focus on the meal. You've learned three things about me. I like to cook, I'm organized, and I'm focused on the end product. Talk about yourself in context to the role or your proficiencies in the role. Round three with peers or cross-functional peers is going to be about your brain, how it works, how you approach things, the actions that you take, and your fit in the company. I think when you look at competencies, proficiencies, so many people have this laundry list on their resumes of like key skills or areas of expertise. You really only have four. We've talked about abilities rolling up to competencies, rolling up to proficiencies. One competency has to live in the critical thinking bucket, the strategy bucket. One proficiency needs to live in the process bucket. One proficiency needs to live in the tactical execution budget. And one proficiency, particularly in 2021, needs to be about plays nice with others. Those are the things you want to communicate to this peer group across the partner organization and across the company with people, with your peers in cross-functional. My second biggest piece of advice as you go through the interview process is answer the question and then unpack it. If you read music at all, you might get this. Before you open your mouth, take a rest, take a breath, process the question, line up your answer, and then speak in midtones moderately. Take a rest, get your thoughts together, and then deliver it in midtones and moderately. The reason I say midtones moderately, yes, you want to show passion. Yes, you want to show enthusiasm. And yes, you want to give them what they're going to get. In the interview process, I think you temper it just a tiny bit. We were going over this with the panelists last night, and I said, you know, when I get excited, my voice goes up 3 octaves. I have to really focus on keeping it calm. I recommend that you do the same thing. Let's talk about this test, especially in a creative field. It's very likely in a creative function. It's also true in marketing functions, but in creative functions, you know, this is one of those show us your stuff things. Number one, don't do it in your brand. If it's a deck or whatever it is, it's probably going to be a deck. Do it in your brand. Do not attempt to duplicate theirs. And the second big piece of advice is do not solve a problem for them. Do not bring a solution to the table. Talk about your approach. It's either going to be a case study or solve a problem. Again, do not give away the farm. Show them the farm, drive by the farm and say, isn't that a gorgeous farm? And then say, you know what? That apple, that corn, those beautiful carrots can be yours, but do not solve a problem for them. Talk to them about your approach as to how you would solve a problem. The other thing that gives you the opportunity to do is talk about collaboration, talk about data analysis, talk about customer, talk about looking at results of traffic flow through a department. Take the opportunity to talk about your analytical skills. Don't solve it for them. Tell them what your approach would be. Round 4 is could be with when you make it this far, which is great, could be with the team of people that's going to report to you. And they're going to ask you questions about your philosophies, about the function, your management style, your leadership style. There's a difference between those things, and what your values are. That whole value thing, particularly as we move into 2021, those are the questions they're going to ask you. And then if you make it to round 5 with leadership, you've got to be thinking that those questions in that conversation are going to be high level, philosophical, and theoretical. One of the things that a lot of times people say, nobody got back to me. How do I follow up? My third biggest piece of advice is expect the unexpected. Don't, and the unexpected here is, or the expected here is, I sent them an email Monday. It's Wednesday afternoon. Why haven't they gotten back? Well, because their mother died, because their child broke their leg and they're caring for their children. This has happened over the past several months because all of a sudden I'm a teacher and having to work because I've got 2 kids I've got to homeschool and take care of. So I advise you to think in extremes. And as you think in extremes, what's the question that you fear most? This goes back to the job description comparison. What's the question you can answer the easiest? As you go into these interviews and as you're preparing for these interviews, think in extremes. Again, I'm going to repeat it. What's the one question that scares you to death? Be ready to answer it. What's the easiest question? You're going to answer it. There you've got the opportunity to get creative and answer it in a creative way. You're probably going to get to the end and somebody's going to say, what questions do you have for me? This is a golden opportunity and you should take it as part of the interview process. I'm sure that everybody's heard this before, but it's worth reiterating. At some point, somewhere between round 2 and round 3, probably at round 2, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. So what questions do you have for me? My recommendation is write all of your questions out and prioritize them because you might only get one. You're going to get answers to some of these questions as you go through the interview process. Scratch them out. Because if there are 3 minutes left in the interview and you only get one question, it needs to be the question that you want answered most. So let's talk about some questions you could think about preparing during these rounds of interviewing. With the recruiter, you want to ask next steps. You want to know what the hiring process is. You want to know the compensation question. Again, this comes somewhere not before the beginning of round 3. With your hiring manager, clear expectations. Where does the brand practice its core values in your department, in your group, in your team, in your department, across the company? What about the culture? I think you asked the culture question very linearly, and we're going to come back to that in just a second. And one of my favorite questions for a hiring manager is, what has to happen before the end of the week or else the sky is going to fall? that can give you, if they're honest, can give you unbelievable insight into, are they taking on too much work? Are they trying to meet a deadline that they really should have met already? And well, we'll continue that in a second. I think asking the culture question, if you say, tell me about the culture, they're going to tell you how fabulous it is. I think the best way to ask the culture question is linearly. What do you do to facilitate the harmony across the organization, or harmony and happiness across the organization? What measurements do you have in place that metric the health and happiness of the organization? Oh, we do it all anecdotally, and then we do it at review time. Yellow flag. We do it anecdotally. We do it every day. We do a 10-question monthly, a 25-question quarterly, a 50-question semi-annually. Great. What were the results of that last survey? Oh, we're at 98% love or extremely love. Big yellow flag. Well, last time we came in at about 68, 69%. What do you have in place? What's your goal? And what do you have in place to reach your goal? Ask the culture question linearly. Among your peer group, ask what winning looks like in their view. You're going to know it from your hiring manager because you're going to get those clear expectations. What do your peers think of it? And ask them what has to happen before the end of the week, or else the sky will fall. You want to be hearing consistency here with your reporting team. What's working? What's not working? What are their hot buttons? What resonates with them? And what individually, collectively, what sends them into orbit? You coming in at 5:30 saying, stop what you're doing, we're working until 8, find out about that. Ask them what has to happen before the end of the week or the sky will fall, and compare those answers. For leadership, what keeps you awake at night? And how does this role affect the organization as a whole and its goals? So now that you've been through the interview process, you have to follow up on it. And we're going to talk about thank yous. Email is fine to a degree. Dear Sarah, thank you so much for your time today to discuss the role of senior store design and construction, senior designer. I am very experienced at this and very experienced at that. I've done this, I've done that. I know my experience would be very valuable to your company. Please feel free to reach out, contact me with any questions. You need to delete that as fast as you can. That is thank you note 98. The reason you take copious notes is so that you can refer to them. Hi, Sarah. You mentioned in our chat on Tuesday that you were focused on a certain design challenge in your housewares department. I keep thinking about that, and I've got a half a dozen ideas about how we could approach it and solve it. I can't wait to share them with you. And thinking about the whole conversation, I'm certain that my design skills, organizational skills, and leadership skills would be a great value to your team. That's where you get your self-gratuitous plug. Thanks so much for your time in the great banner. I really enjoyed it. If you want anything else, don't hesitate to reach back. I hope the rest of your week goes well. And again, thanks for your time. I look forward to chatting soon. And since I've said, feel free to reach back, my phone number is under my name. Handwritten is better. If you can figure it out in 2021, still the country, half the country locked down, to get a handwritten thank you note. I was I was joking with the other panelists last night. Send them a handwritten thank you note from a collection of thank you notes that are out of print that your mother left you in her will. Dear Joe, my mom left these notes in her will and I only use them for very special people. There is nothing sweeter than getting a handwritten thank you note. And the faster you can get it to them, the better. But think about the content. Content is king. So what are the key takeaways from tonight and interviewing? Be prepared. Answer the question. Expect the unexpected. Think in extremes and be prepared. It's not about you, it's about them. It's about what you bring to their table based on your talent, skill set, brain, successes, and proving it in the case of an interview with your words, with your well-crafted, targeted messages. And thank you. Once again, it's been a great pleasure to present to you guys. I hope this was helpful. And I think now we're going to Q&A.
Well, thank you so much, Winston. Yet again, learned so much from you every time. And part of the reason I've been asked to host the Q&A tonight is because I'm in this position right now. And I really appreciate everyone that's put on this series so far and participated, because I've gotten so much personally. Let's start with the first question. I kind of have these in order of before the interview, to the interview, and how to follow up. So first question, how do you guys see firms handling recruiting in 2021? Is it social media based? Is it LinkedIn? Is it institutions directly? How are you guys seeing that happening?
I want Genevieve to answer that question first.
So this is an interesting one, because for my company, we post jobs on our company website. I'm not sure where they go as far as the company promoting on LinkedIn. Julia, who also works for 7-Eleven, could probably weigh in on that. But we have hired a lot of people over the past 12 months, and 99% of them we found through either somebody who reached out to me or the hiring manager on LinkedIn and said, hey, I saw a job posting, or I saw a post you made about something and I'd love to talk more. Can I send you my resume? That's a really great way to get in, as well as through referrals. Somebody who works for us, or has worked for us in the past, said, hey, I know so-and-so who's looking for a job. I think they might be a great fit. And can I share their resume with you? And I found that a lot of success for me personally, and not just at 7-Eleven, but at my other adventures as well, where I have found the best people through those folks who have the get up and go to just reach out to me on LinkedIn, or as a referral from somebody who thinks, hey, I think this person would be a great culture fit.
I would just add to that the role of a recruiter is not what it was even 10 years ago. The big recruiting firms, the Korn Ferries and the Russell Reynolds of the world, the only secrets they've got are executive level, confidential, retained searches. They don't do middle management stuff, even upper management stuff like they used to, because everything is out there now.
I think Genevieve's right. The market right now for opportunities to be hired in the retail design field, it's just very opportunistic. I would encourage anyone who maybe 3 or 4 months ago had spoken, especially on the consulting side, if you've talked to somebody and you thought you were getting ready to be hired and they said, oh, sorry, this project just went on hold or whatever, reach back out to them. I mean, circle back to everyone that you really felt like you had a strong interview with, because things can change on a dime and the market is really starting to pick back up. And people, on the hiring side or in a design firm might be thinking, oh, what was that guy's name? We all really liked him. But if you keep in touch with people, I think it could really work to your advantage right now.
Networking is imperative.
I have a woman who who works for us at 7-Eleven now, and I had met her over a year prior when I was at a previous stop, and we had a great connection. And probably, I mean, I know I wouldn't have continued following up with her at that point. I had a lot on my plate. And she just made a point to every month or so reach out, say, hey, I saw this article I thought was interesting, or I saw this thing you guys are doing that looks great. And constantly, like, I was like, oh yeah, she's great. I really like her. When I came to 7-Eleven and I had an opening, she was the first person I hired. And I'm so happy that she stayed in touch with me.
Great advice.
Yeah,
So I got
indeed.
a portfolio one afternoon, and it was from a young girl who was, I don't know how she got our email addresses, but anyway, she said, here's my portfolio. I'm driving through Cincinnati. I'm on my way to Columbus to interview with a competitor of yours. Are you interested in looking at my portfolio? We looked at our portfolio and we said, sure, stop by. We didn't have any open positions, but she had great work. We loved her and we ended up hiring her. So it was just very opportunistic.
I love that
Yes.
story.
Yeah, indeed. And I was going to piggyback on both what Genevieve and Barb shared in a little bit. Winston went over in the presentation, but ultimately, I have not really interviewed for a single job in my entire 20-year career that I've enjoyed because it has been word of mouth, networking, and or in some cases, identifying the company that you really are interested in and being a student of that organization. What Winston pointed out in his presentation, understanding what some of the opportunities are, really investigating the job description, going through it, doing a really introspective individual view of yourself and saying, well, what do I have? What skills do I have? If there are any gaps there, how can I do it? And being honest about it when you do get an opportunity. But a lot of times it's just about making those opportunities. You have to create some opportunities for yourself a lot of times, and being in the right place, talking to the right people, having conversations that may not even seem relevant at the time. But it's not just the networking, but I think someone has coined the make the network work for you to some degree, but all very, very appropriate advice. And I'm trying to remember, I think the only interview literally I did was for my family's company. They made me interview for one of my first jobs when I was younger. So yeah, very good advice.
Well, great. Next question is, with everything being so virtual, there's normally an HR stop, you're sending everything in electronically. What's the best way to give them a sense of your personality through all of these virtual platforms and show your passion?
I'll start. Again, it's this whole notion of creatively developed messaging. And I'm just a quick example of this. I know of a case, literally, this is a fact. It was for a design role, interestingly enough, and it was down to 2 candidates, and they were absolutely rubber stamps of each other. They were absolutely neck and neck. It's like somebody was going to end up tossing a coin, and the HR person said, give me an hour, I'll get back with you. And the HR person went back and said to the team, I was on the team, said to the team, her cover letter was better than hers. It was more creative. It was more expressive. That says to me, she's a better written communicator. She wins. When you're doing it like this, it's easy to show passion. If you're doing it in writing, even over the phone, it's tone of voice. If you're doing it in writing, for God's sake, people, we're creative people here. Be creative in the way you craft your messaging. This is how crazy I am. I'd write it in French and make them copy it and paste it into Google Translate. Just to be creative. That's probably an extreme. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. But be creative in the way you express yourself in writing.
Winston, you also had given us an example of sending a note with a small potted orchid to a company. It was a thank you note. I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah, it was like $3 down in the flower market. It was about this big. Like the pot was about like 2 inches around. Stuck the thank you note in it and delivered it to the front desk.
Yep.
I think written communication is so important in any role that it gives you an opportunity. If this is something that you happen to be good at, it gives you an opportunity to get a leg up. And as well, if it's not something that you're good at, it's something you need to hone. And
Or get a ghostwriter.
well, I would think that's being a little dishonest, because if someone could hire you based on your written communication, and then when they hire you that you can't, right?
Get a ghostwriter and take a cop and ret class.
But I think that honing your, and I think we've talked about this before about creating your brand and being authentic, and make sure that that resonates in your writing. There's some people who you read even their emails, and it's like you can hear them talking to you just by the way that they structure their sentences. I would just definitely recommend to make your writing a reflection of your brand.
I want to unpack that just a little bit, Genevieve. In an email, the difference between a contraction and a person and a verb is night and day. The difference between I'm and I am is absolutely night and day. I am is rigid and strict and by the book. I'm is me. You would think about the way you talk and write it.
And I must say, when I've been reading through so many of the thank you notes or people following up relative to jobs and interests, it's really those who you can glean are being their authentic selves. So typically, when you think about reaching out to folks, if you have a quirky personality or something that you think is a little odd or strange, or people have given you positive feedback on those things, let others know in a way, in a written style or format, that these are things that interest you, because you never know who watches the same reality TV show. Maybe it came up in one of the interviews and you refer back to it as a PS or something to end the conversation, or even to begin the conversation. I think Winston referred to it as come with an icebreaker in mind. So taking those copious notes, really understanding your audience, who you're talking to, learning things, and to some extent, hopefully caring about what they're sharing so that you can bring those things back. But be yourself as much as possible and try and let that shine through.
A couple of years ago, I had an interview at LVMH corporate, and I wore a suit and tie, and the woman there said you didn't need to wear a tie. I said, well, I just feel comfortable in a tie. After the interview was over, I went around the corner to Starbucks, took off the tie, took a picture of myself from here down, and sent her my thank you note as a DM in Twitter with a picture of my tie on. Guess what? I went to round 2.
Yeah. Well, I love, think about for your follow-up, think about something that you discussed during the conversation that's job relevant that you could follow up on, but then like Julia said, like a PS or, oh, hey, you said you liked my shoes. They're on sale right now. I just saw them at the store. They're on sale. Or, whatever kind of.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all great points. I love the stories that come along with them too. This one we have in the chat, and basically, how do you express confidence without coming off as a little too showy or aggressive?
I think you need to be, so we talk a lot about being humble, hungry, and what's the other one, Julia?
Honest.
The 3 H's. So humble, hungry, and honest. And part of being confident is also being humble and being able to show your vulnerability. You're not great at everything. You're not perfect. So highlight what you are good at, but if there's opportunity to show that you've got something you're not great at, let them know and say how you're working on that development gap.
And I will say for the folks who may have been in the workforce as long as some of us, I'll use myself as an example, sometimes it helps to tell people what others have said about you, not what you think of yourself, because that could come
That's
across
great.
as egotistical. But it's really putting others, you know, my former manager or my existing manager or the VP of this or the board directors said this about me. And though I tend to agree, I know I have opportunities emotionally to develop that quotient or whatever, but you want to sound and be as authentic. Again, it kind of goes back to that authenticity. Let people see those quirky things in your personality, and that, I mean, I'm a bit of an egomaniac. You know, I always giggle when people say you exude so much confidence. Well, you know, I do that because I have a little bit of an ego and I try and temper it. So there are those who maybe resonate with what I'm saying, because maybe that's why the question was posed. You don't want it to come across as being braggadocious or conceited, but you want it to just state, you know, this is what people have said about me.
And
Oh, sorry, just to piggyback on that, I also think it's really great to credit, you know, that, you know, I was so fortunate to have the opportunity to show this, or I really give credit to my team for all of their contributions, which allowed me to shine. Sorry, I have a crying baby in the background.
and I would unpack a little bit, especially on what Julie was saying. When you're crafting these messages, do everything you can to avoid using the first person singular. Nothing says conceit more than I. Try to craft your messages not to start every sentence with I this.
I definitely watch that in all of the emails I send, especially when you're trying to follow up on positions and things like that, where you're asking these questions. It definitely makes, you don't want to come off like, oh, what are you doing for me? It's still, how can I, you know, I'm excited for this opportunity still. One of the ones that I'm really excited to ask is, with the interview process for designers often being of our previous work, where we're going through maybe half the interview discussing our portfolio, how do we get through the portfolio while still painting a full picture? And do you have any key elements that you like to hear from an interviewee?
I think the danger, some people, not danger, I think what happens sometime when people present their portfolios is they start with all the detail. And I think, just generally speaking, and Genevieve or Julia or Winston, you may agree or disagree, but I think if you start high level and big picture, and then let them ask the detail questions. And also, if you, somebody said this before, make sure if you're going through a portfolio, make sure you give the team credit and be very clear on what you did on a project. But I do think starting high level, because some people, and I'll be honest, I have a short attention span. Some people will start in these details and you just sit there and think, oh my God, it's going to take forever for them to get through this. And I hate to say it, but it's true, you know? So start big, just give big, broad strokes, and then fill in the detail as you go along.
Keep in mind, it's a dialogue. And I feel like a good interview is kind of like a conversation. So just like you would, and I also always say interviewing is like dating. So just like as if you were on a date, you want to make sure that you're matching the same energy level, the same, you know, you want to be matching the energy of the person you're with. So starting broad, waiting for the other person to ask some questions and create a dialogue with it and answer the question, and then stop and let them ask another question is a really good tactic.
It's interesting you say the dating thing, because it really is, but it's even more abbreviated than that. And I think it's one of the reasons that you take the opportunity to ask some probing questions. I'm gonna turn. Tell me how do you practice your brand values across the organization? I'm going to turn that into how do you brush your teeth? How do you take a shower? The thing about the interview process and dating is you're going to go out on 3 or 4, maybe 7 dates before you get married. Think about, you're about to marry this person.
Yeah.
Hopefully not, full commitment like that, but
Look, I think jobs take commitment.
Sometimes more than a marriage.
It's a big, I mean, as a hiring manager, that is a huge commitment to hire somebody because, I mean, you no matter what you get, you might think you can't just like up and fire somebody. Like you're with that person for a long time. For better or for worse.
It does. It works both ways. That's why I think that the interview process has to be conversational. It has to be muscular, and it has to be authentic because you're about to spend the next 10 hours a day, 5 days a week for the next 3 years with this person that you've only met 4 times. So just think about that.
And also as a hiring manager, the people that you hire are a reflection of you. Like if I can't go to a meeting or anytime the people on my team are presenting themselves, it's a reflection on me. So I want to be really careful and selective on who I hire. So, being able to have a conversation, being able to read, engage when someone's interested in hearing those details versus not, and they're starting to tune out, that's a really important skill to have.
And on the consulting, oh, I'm sorry, Julia.
Oh, I was just going to say, sometimes it's just as simple as saying, here's my portfolio. I'm going to start with a couple of things I'm most proud of, or that I've gotten the most feedback on, or that the team has shared with me that, have some pride in them. If you would like, I can go into the details, or these sort of 3 represent some of the activities I've been engaged in. But sometimes, to Genevieve's point, just piggybacking on what she was saying and a little bit of Winston, it's guiding the conversation and then trying to read and respond.
I kind of love the approach of, here's my portfolio, flip through it, and ask me any question you want to ask me along the way. Barb, you were going to say something?
Yeah, but I lost it. So next question.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. That was a good answer, I thought.
Well, thank you.
Well, let's see. What's another question? I guess another one that we've kind of brushed a few times is kind of this follow-up. And so what is let's say they've given you a time frame of 2 weeks before they're going to make their decision. What would you say is the best way to follow up? And I actually sent one of these emails yesterday, so I'm very interested in your answer here. But how do you phrase that? Like, what's the best way to follow up once they haven't followed up in the time that they specified?
So Bob, I'm going to ask you how you handled it.
Thank you, Barb.
No. I basically, asked how things were going, and our conversation was very friendly. This is the HR manager that was there throughout the entire interview when I was there. So I was like, hope everything's going well. Hope you're enjoying the sun. I wanted to see how the process is going. I know that I was the first interviewee, and we kind of talked about this 2-week time frame. Just wanted to check in and also express that I'm still very interested in this position. Let me know if you or your team have any questions, and I would love the opportunity to meet again.
That's great.
I think that sounds great.
I also think, and I think Barb alluded to this earlier, or somebody did, I always think it's important to approach with context. If you saw an article, if you saw the CEO on CNBC or Bloomberg, or they just ran a great ad, I think the on-ramp with a little bit of context there is helpful, and it's not so awkward. You know, I saw this ad, you know, reminded me of you. We were supposed to reconnect, following up. I think context is it's an easier in than just, you haven't called me back. You told me you were going to. I'm still interested. What's going on? And again, you know, to the 2-week thing, you don't know what's going on in people's lives. And I hope you didn't send that follow-up email at 12:01 a.m. on day 15. You would be surprised how many people do that. They like got the email in their draft folder and they just hit the enter button.
I would definitely say that send the email during business hours. To me, I don't mind. I mean, if you have some context, great. But so as a hiring manager, if I have a candidate that I'm interested in, I give them updates like, oh, hey, I'm really interested in you. Like, here's where we are in the process. Because I know how it feels, because I'm that person who's checking.
You're the exception.
Like, they didn't text me back.
You're the exception, not the rule.
I don't know, most people don't do that. But I think it's important to follow up, because 2 weeks later, they might have forgotten you because they talked to some other people and they refreshing their memory of how great you are. And also re-emphasizing that you're interested in the role, because, you know, while you don't want to come across as too desperate, you also want to come across as somebody who's really excited and really wants to be a part of the team.
And I would even argue that if they said, we'll get back to you in 2 weeks, in 1 week, find a piece of context and frame it so that it was just so overwhelming. I could not resist. I found this nugget and I could not resist but to share it with you and bring it to your attention.
And I would even say, like, so I'm really just kind of like an over communicator, but if somebody said to me, we'll get back to you in 2 weeks, it's like, all right, great. I look forward to hearing from you. And if I don't hear from you in 2 weeks, just know I'll send you a follow-up.
Love that too.
Yeah, that's perfect. The other thing I would suggest is, if you follow up by email, maybe wait another, if you don't hear anything, wait another week and then give them a phone call if you have a number. So just kind of mix it up a little bit. And then, you know, let's face it, sometimes it takes a while to make a decision. Then maybe if it's 3 or 4 weeks after that, another handwritten note, and try to, as Winston said, try to find maybe some kind of context or some excuse, but just kind of mix it up a little bit instead of just getting into the email routine.
But also, if somebody doesn't respond to you, do you really want to work for that company? I mean, that's kind of crappy that you send an email and then they don't even get back to you.
Yeah,
That's a very, very valid point. Again, I'm going to argue you don't know what's going on in their life. And now, Barb, I lost what I was going to say, so we're even.
Just a quick observation from here. Oftentimes you're interviewing with multiple people from the same company. Do not put the same exact note for each person you're sending a thank you to.
That is such good advice.
Think that they don't talk, and especially even if it's a handwritten note, because if it's a handwritten note, you know they're talking to one another. Did you get a handwritten note from Cynthia? Like, oh, it was so great, and she mentioned this, and then Barb's gonna say, well, she sent me the same exact note. and that looks really, really bad. So be very careful, because you are almost always interviewing with more than one person. I mean, I've had where I interviewed with one person and then I did a phone interview with 4 other people, and then I did an in-person interview with 2 other people. So many a times you're interviewing with so many different people. Just, you know, bear that one in mind.
And they're talking about you.
Right.
yeah.
They're talking about you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and it's
time
good. I was just gonna little bit of commentary. It's also good for when you are a referral and maybe didn't go through a traditional inroads, to make sure you reach back out to the person that referred you originally and give them timely updates. And sometimes they can be a guide for what's the next appropriate moment to contact someone, or to Winston's point, let you know that something maybe has occurred that has derailed that timeline. And so it's good to continuously follow up. So
Allow me to repeat it. It's a dogfight disguised as a chess game. And now I remember what I was going to say. When you don't hear back from them at 23 hours and 59 minutes on day 14, don't read anything into it. I use this phrase, no tarot cards, no tea leaves. When somebody hasn't come back in 14 days, all of a sudden, oh, I did this wrong, I did that, oh, what about you did it? Don't read, there are no tea leaves, there are no tarot cards. It's a dogfight disguised as a strategy. Strategize your fight.
And if they
Absolutely.
need to hire someone, that probably means they're busy. So
Don't read anything into it, please.
well, we had one more question that popped up in the chat, if we have time for it, or
Yes.
okay.
Go right ahead.
Okay, what if you're doing multiple interviews with various companies? How do you play up your interest while knowing that the person company may be one of a few opportunities?
I would say, I've said this to others and I've heard it, and you just say, hey, just so you know, I'm really interested in this role. I am talking to a couple of other companies, but I'm really, really interested. So I want to keep that in mind before I make any other decisions. I'll circle back with you and let you know, but I really hope to continue this conversation.
Yeah, I think honesty is best.
I think it kind of depends where you are in the process. I have known of, I've even recommended, I have known of people who are overqualified for a role, or really not that interested in a role, who've thrown their paper at it. Number one, to see if they get traction. Number two, hey, they offered me this interview. I've got no interest in this job, but I'm going to go on the interview just for the practice. That's a little smarmy. At the same time, I think it's okay. But I think the multiple companies, it just kind of depends on where you are in the interview process, in the hiring process. And just kind of a little bit of a rabbit trail, but to Genevieve's point, I am interviewing with other people. When you're down to the negotiation stage and you think you're going to get an offer from the company that you really want, but these guys offer you something, it's too late then to come back and say, I'm talking to somebody else. Because it's perceived as, here's some tarot cards for you. Here's some tea leaves for you. It's perceived as a deflection move. Let them know up front, this is my first interview with you. I'm talking to other companies because I'm interested in this role because I'm looking to take my skill set to the right company.
Funny you mentioned that.
Then it's about you and them.
It's funny you mentioned that. I had a woman who I extended a job to, and I thought she was great. And she said, I need, to take, a week to think about it. And I was like, okay, it's a move. Take a week to think about it. She comes back after a week and says, well, there's this other job that I want more. And I thought that they were going to make a decision by now, but they didn't. So I find out if the other job makes the decision. And at that point I was like, well, our offer expired.
You're right. What not to do, right?
So why don't we just go with that other company?
There should be some corporal punishment for just being stupid. I can't.
The nicest handwritten thank you note. She was so wonderful. It says that, and I was like,
oh my goodness.
I hear that stuff, and I'm appalled by that.
Yeah. And again, it points to what you said though, Winston, that it's that moment in time. Should people know their value, know their worth, sort of pulse the environment to make sure they still have the most cutting edge skills and all this other stuff? Yeah, but you don't go down a rabbit hole, have people extending offers to you or get to a salary discussion and then decide, oh, I'm talking to 5 other people, or I'm really not interested. I was just trying to test out the waters. That gets a little sketchy.
And once in a blue moon, I mean, having 2 competing offers is a great problem to have, right? And it happens occasionally. I think where it is bad is when you try to force it to happen, because that says a lot about your behavior. To the point that the story that Genevieve just told, I don't want this person working for me.
And
I love instead of we're rescinding the offer, I'm sorry, the offer's
It's
expired.
expired.
I love that. I love
That's funny.
But
Love
you know, that could have, so here's somebody who this happened, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. I still know this woman's name and I will never hire her. Versus, you know, she could have handled it totally differently. She could have went with another opportunity and we could have ended it in a good note. And then I could have thought of her for a role in the future. So you really have an opportunity to plant a seed or burn a bridge.
carefully crafted messaging.
I will say the only worst thing, and we did have this happen in December, when somebody accepts the job, starts the job, and then after like 3 or 4 days in the job, quits and says the other company that I really wanted to work for offered a good job, and then we have to get their computer and like that did happen to us on Christmas Eve. He quit.
It does happen. And to be honest with you, it happens every day. But you don't want to be in that. You don't want to be in that Bermuda Triangle. You just don't.
The only quick add I would have for that to this conversation is be honest. I mean, don't think that, you know, saying you're interviewing somewhere else when you really aren't, or giving a name of another company, because chances are good that you're going to be found out somehow. Someone's going to know you or whatever. So just be honest, because if you're not, you're going to get caught.
I can't reinforce what Barb just said enough. Be honest and be authentic. Otherwise, you know, oh, what a tangled web we weave.
Right.
That's all I can say.
Yeah.
And design is such a small world too, that if you say you're applying for a position somewhere, they can be like, oh, are you interviewing this person? Like, what stage are you guys at?
Right. Right.
Oh, Cynthia, you're on mute.
Sorry, small children in the background. I'd like to thank all of our panelists again for joining us today. Winston, again, thank you. Your presentation was amazing as always.
Thank you.
Thank you to Genevieve and to Barb. Thank you to Bob, who let us check out his portfolio in the last session and then agreed to jump in and ask the questions for this session. And thank you to Julia for joining us for the first time today. I thought you all had some really, really great value and input to add in. I love the personal stories. I think that all of us watching at home can relate in some way, shape, or form to each and every one of them. So again, thank you. We are definitely doing a service to the retail industry with each one of these that we present. So I'd like for everybody to stay tuned and keep an eye on your email and on your LinkedIn for our next presentation titled Ask Me Anything, that will be coming up in May. Once again, thank you to our international sponsor, Planet Construction. And that will do it for tonight. Have a good night, everybody, and we will see you next month.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.